My son texted me saying, "We've decided to sell the house. Can you leave by Sunday?" I left. But before that, I made a call to the bank and transferred something that left them desperate on Monday. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. The phone buzzed on my kitchen counter at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that started like any other. I was folding Gabriel's old baby clothes, the ones I'd kept in the attic for 34 years, thinking maybe someday I'd have grandchildren to spoil. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone, not from age but from something deeper. A mother's intuition that tells you when everything is about to crumble. "We've decided to sell the house. You can move out by Sunday." No greeting. No explanation. Just cold, calculated words that sliced through my chest like a surgeon's blade. I read the message 3 times before my brain could process what my son had just done to me. Gabriel. My Gabriel. The boy I'd rocked to sleep during countless fever-ridden nights. The child I'd worked 2 jobs to support after his father died when he was only 8 years old. I sank onto the kitchen chair where I'd fed him breakfast every morning for 18 years. The same chair where I'd helped him with homework, where I'd listened to his teenage problems, where I'd celebrated his acceptance to college with tears of pride streaming down my face. Now, at 62 years old, I was being discarded like an old piece of furniture that no longer fit the decor. The house felt different suddenly. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow cast by the afternoon sun through the living room windows, everything whispered the same horrible truth. This was no longer my home. I was no longer wanted here. My fingers moved automatically to call him back, but I stopped myself. What would I say? "Please don't throw me away? Please remember that I sacrificed everything for you?" The words felt pathetic even in my own mind. Instead, I walked through each room like a ghost visiting her own life. The living room where Gabriel took his first steps. The kitchen where I'd taught him to cook scrambled eggs. His bedroom still decorated with baseball posters from high school, because I could never bring myself to change it. Each space held decades of memories that apparently meant nothing to him now. The cruelest part wasn't the eviction itself. It was the casual way he'd delivered it. Like firing an employee. Like canceling a subscription. No emotion, no acknowledgement of what this house represented. No recognition that he was destroying the only stability I'd known since his father's death. I knew exactly who was behind this. Melissa. His wife of 3 years who'd never liked me, who'd made it clear from day one that I was an inconvenience in their perfect life. She'd smile sweetly at family dinners while making cutting remarks about how I should find my own place and start a new chapter. Gabriel would just nod along, too weak or too blind to see how she was systematically isolating him from everyone who'd loved him before she arrived. The irony burned like acid in my throat. I'd raised Gabriel to be independent, to stand up for what was right, to protect the people he loved. Instead, I'd created a man who couldn't protect his own mother from the woman sleeping beside him. I remembered the day Melissa first walked into this house. Beautiful, confident, with perfectly manicured nails and a smile that never reached her eyes. She'd surveyed my home like a real estate appraiser, commenting on how quaint everything was, how outdated the kitchen looked, how much potential the place had with the right renovations. I should have seen the warning signs then. But Gabriel was happy. Or at least he seemed happy. He laughed more, dressed better, talked about his future with excitement I hadn't heard since he was a child. I convinced myself that my discomfort was just typical mother-in-law jealousy. I told myself to be grateful that someone loved my son, even if that someone made me feel invisible in my own home. The phone buzzed again. My heart jumped, hoping Gabriel had reconsidered, hoping he'd realized the magnitude of what he'd just done. Instead, it was a text from Melissa. "Hi Ann. So excited about the house sale. Gabriel and I found the perfect buyers. Don't worry about packing everything. We'll donate whatever you can't take. XOXO. The casual cruelty of it made my hands shake. She was excited. This wasn't a difficult decision for them. This wasn't keeping them awake at night. They'd been planning this, discussing it, making arrangements while I cooked their Sunday dinners and babied them through every little crisis. I set the phone down and looked around my kitchen one more time. 30 years of mortgage payments. 30 years of maintenance and repairs I'd handled alone. 30 years of turning a house into a home, only to have it sold out from under me by the very person I'd done it all for. The silence was deafening. For the first time in decades, I was completely alone with the truth. I'd spent my entire adult life sacrificing everything for a son who saw me as disposable. And now, with less than 5 days to find somewhere to live, I had to face a reality I'd been avoiding for years. But as I sat there in the growing darkness, something else began to stir. Something cold and calculating that I'd kept buried under years of unconditional love and endless forgiveness. They thought they knew everything about me. They thought I was just a helpless old woman they could discard without consequences. They had no idea what they just unleashed. The next morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. sharp, the way I had every day for the past 40 years. My body didn't care that my world had collapsed the night before. Habits die hard, even when everything else dies around them. I made coffee in the same mug I'd used since Gabriel was in high school. A chipped ceramic one with "World's Best Mom" painted in fading blue letters. He'd given it to me for Mother's Day when he was 16, saving up his part-time job money to buy something special. The memory felt like a knife twisting in an already open wound. I had 4 days. 4 days to pack up 62 years of life and find somewhere to disappear to. But as I sipped my coffee and stared at the boxes I'd pulled from the garage, something nagged at me. The timing. The urgency. The way Melissa had seemed so prepared with her cheerful text about donations. That's when I decided to do something I'd never done before. I was going to look through Gabriel's old room. Not to reminisce, but to understand. His dresser drawers were mostly empty now, except for a few forgotten items from high school. But in the back of the bottom drawer, underneath an old baseball glove, my fingers found something that made my heart stop. A folder. A thick manila folder that definitely hadn't been there when I cleaned his room last month. With shaking hands, I opened it. The first document was a real estate appraisal for my house, dated 6 months ago. 6 months. They'd been planning this for half a year, while I'd been cooking Sunday dinners and buying Christmas presents for their ungrateful hearts. The appraisal valued the house at $425,000, a number that made my breath catch. I'd had no idea the house was worth so much. The neighborhood had changed over the years, young families moving in, property values climbing, but I'd never paid attention to any of that. This was just home to me. But clearly it was much more than home to Gabriel and Melissa. I kept reading. There were printed emails between Gabriel and various real estate agents, going back months. Discussions about optimal timing for the sale, about handling the current occupant situation, about maximizing profit potential. The current occupant. That's what I was to my own son. A situation to be handled. One email from Melissa to Gabriel made my blood run cold. Your mom will understand eventually. She's lived here rent-free for years. Think of all the money we're losing every month by not selling. Besides, she needs to learn to be independent. We're actually doing her a favor. Rent-free. I read those words 5 times before they sank in. Rent-free, as if I hadn't paid the mortgage on this house for 30 years. As if I hadn't worked double shifts as a nurse to keep us afloat after Robert died. As if every sacrifice I'd made meant absolutely nothing. But there was more. Much more. I found a letter from a financial advisor, addressed to Gabriel, discussing liquidating family assets and maximizing investment potential. They weren't just selling my house. They were treating it like an inheritance they were tired of waiting for. The most devastating document was at the bottom of the pile. A handwritten note from Melissa in her perfect looping script. You talked to the lawyer today. Since the house is in your name, thank God you convinced your mom to add you years ago for emergencies. We can proceed whenever we want. She technically has no legal claim. The lawyer says as long as we give her reasonable notice, we're in the clear. I'm thinking a week should be enough time. Love you. M. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped the paper. Years ago, when Gabriel was going through his divorce from his first wife, he'd asked me to add his name to the deed, just in case something happened to me. He'd said it was for my protection so he could handle things if I got sick. I trusted him completely. I'd signed those papers because I believed my son would never hurt me. I'd given him the power to destroy me, and he'd been planning to use it for months. But as I sat there on his old bed, surrounded by evidence of their betrayal, I remembered something they clearly didn't know about. Something I'd never told Gabriel, never told anyone, because I'd always planned it to be a surprise inheritance for him when I died. The bank account. For 37 years since Robert's death, I'd been putting away small amounts of money. $50 here, $100 there, whenever I could manage it. Money from overtime shifts, from selling Robert's tools, from a small life insurance policy I'd cashed in years ago. Money I'd saved by buying generic groceries, by mending clothes instead of buying new ones, by denying myself small luxuries so Gabriel could have what he needed. It had grown, slowly but steadily, sitting in a savings account at a different bank, earning modest interest year after year. The last time I checked, almost 6 months ago, the balance was just over $380,000. Gabriel didn't know about it. I'd planned to tell him when he needed it, when he was ready to buy his own house or start a family. I'd pictured myself surprising him with the news, seeing his face light up with gratitude and love. It was going to be my final gift to him, proof that even after death, his mother would still be taking care of him. But Gabriel already had his house. Gabriel already had his life planned out. And that life didn't include room for the woman who'd made it all possible. I carefully put all the documents back in the folder, exactly as I'd found them. My heart was pounding, but not from fear or sadness anymore. Something else was building inside me, something cold and crystal clear. They thought they knew everything. They thought they had all the power. They thought I was just a helpless old woman who would quietly disappear when commanded. But they'd made one crucial mistake. In all their scheming and planning, in all their discussions about my house and my future, they'd forgotten to ask themselves one simple question. What else might the woman who'd outsmarted poverty, who'd raised a child alone, who'd built a stable life from nothing, what else might she be capable of when pushed too far? As I walked downstairs to start packing, I already knew exactly what I was going to do. And for the first time since receiving that horrible text message, I found myself smiling. They wanted me gone by Sunday? Fine. I'd be gone by Sunday. But first I had a phone call to make. Friday morning arrived with an autumn chill that seemed to seep into my bones. I'd barely slept, not because of anxiety, but because of the clarity that had settled over me like a blanket. For the first time in months, maybe years, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I dressed carefully in my best navy blue suit, the one I'd worn to Gabriel's college graduation, to his first wedding, to every important moment in his life where I'd stood proudly in the background. Today it felt like armor. The drive to the bank took 23 minutes through morning traffic. 23 minutes to rehearse what I was going to say, to steel myself for what came next, to say goodbye to the woman who'd spent 37 years putting everyone else's needs before her own. First National Bank sat on the corner of Maple and 3rd, a building I'd walked into hundreds of times over the decades to make small deposits, to check my balance, to slowly build what I'd always thought of as Gabriel's future. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was about to use his future to teach him about consequences. Mrs. Henderson, my usual teller, smiled when she saw me approaching. She'd been working there for almost as long as I'd been banking there, and we'd developed the kind of comfortable familiarity that comes from years of brief, pleasant interactions. "Good morning, Anne. How can I help you today? I need to make some changes to my account," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. Specifically, I need to remove Gabriel Mitchell as the beneficiary on my savings account and life insurance policy. Her smile faltered slightly. Changes to beneficiary information weren't routine Friday morning business. "Of course. Let me pull up your account and get the paperwork started. May I ask if you'd like to name a new beneficiary? Or leave it blank for now?" I thought about this all night. Who deserved what Gabriel was about to lose? Who had shown me the kindness and respect that my own son couldn't manage? Yes, I'd like to name St. Catherine's Retirement Home as the sole beneficiary. Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose slightly, but she maintained her professional composure. St. Catherine's was where I'd volunteered for the past 8 years, reading to residents who rarely had visitors, organizing activities for people whose own families had forgotten them. It seemed fitting that Gabriel's inheritance would go to support other elderly people whose children had disappointed them. The paperwork took 45 minutes. 45 minutes of signing documents, of answering security questions, of making changes that would ripple through Gabriel's life in ways he couldn't imagine yet. The savings account alone was worth $387,412. The life insurance policy would add another $150,000. More than $500,000 that Gabriel had been counting on without even knowing it existed. Money that would now go to strangers who'd shown me more warmth in 8 years of volunteering than my son had shown me in the past 3 years of marriage to Melissa. "Is there anything else I can help you with today?" Mrs. Henderson asked as she handed me copies of all the paperwork. "Actually, yes. I'd like to set up a small checking account. Something separate from everything else." She nodded and pulled out another set of forms. I transferred $5,000 from my savings into the new account. Enough to rent a modest apartment, to buy groceries for a few months, to start over at 62 years old. It wasn't much, but it was more than Gabriel was giving me. As I signed the final document, Mrs. Henderson leaned forward slightly. "And I hope you don't mind me saying this, but in all the years I've known you, you've always talked about your son with such pride. Is everything all right?" For a moment, I considered giving her the polite lie I'd perfected over the years. "Everything's fine. Gabriel's doing well. We're very close." But sitting there with evidence of his betrayal fresh in my mind, I found I didn't have the energy for pretense anymore. "My son is selling my house out from under me," I said quietly. "I have 2 days to move out." Her face went pale. "Oh my goodness, Anne. I had no idea. I'm so sorry." "Thank you. But I'm handling it." The drive home felt different. Lighter somehow, as if I'd just set down a burden I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to walk without it. Gabriel would discover what he'd lost eventually. Maybe when he went to buy a bigger house, maybe when he started planning for retirement, maybe when he faced some crisis and expected his reliable mother to bail him out one more time. But by then it would be too late. The money would be gone, transformed into wheelchair ramps and recreational programs and holiday dinners for people who actually appreciated kindness when they received it. I spent the rest of Friday packing methodically, carefully. I took my clothes, my few pieces of jewelry, some books that meant something to me. I left behind the expensive dishes Gabriel had encouraged me to buy for family dinners, the furniture I'd saved for years to purchase, the decorations that had made the house feel like home. Let them sell it all with the house. Let them profit from every sacrifice I'd made. But I did take one thing that would send a message. In the kitchen, tucked behind the flour canister where I'd hidden it for decades, was the envelope containing the original deed to the house. The deed from before Gabriel's name was added, with a handwritten note from Robert about how proud he was that we'd finally owned our own home. I left that envelope on Gabriel's childhood bed, right next to the folder where I'd found evidence of their betrayal. Not because I thought it would change anything legally, but because I wanted him to remember just once that this house had been built on love and sacrifice, not greed and manipulation. Saturday passed in a blur of final preparations. I'd found a small furnished apartment across town. Nothing fancy but clean and quiet and mine. The deposit and first month's rent took exactly $2,000 from my new checking account. I'd be sleeping on someone else's furniture and eating off someone else's dishes, but I'd be doing it with dignity and tact. Sunday morning arrived gray and drizzling, as if the weather itself was marking the end of an era. I loaded my car with the last of my belongings and took one final walk through the house where I'd raised my son, where I'd buried my husband's memory, where I'd learned that love and sacrifice weren't always enough to guarantee loyalty. At exactly 11 a.m., I locked the front door for the last time and slipped the key through the mail slot. Gabriel had said I could leave by Sunday. He hadn't specified what time. As I drove away, I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me worth seeing anymore. But in my rearview mirror, I caught sight of a familiar car turning onto my old street. Gabriel's blue sedan, probably coming to check on my progress, to make sure I'd followed orders like a good, obedient mother. He was about to discover that obedient mothers and broken mothers weren't the same thing at all. And somewhere in the depths of my purse, my phone was already starting to buzz with what would become the first of many, many desperate calls. The war was just beginning. Monday morning brought the reckoning I'd been waiting for. I was unpacking books in my new apartment when my phone rang for the first time. Gabriel's name flashed on the screen, and for a split second muscle memory almost made me answer. 34 years of dropping everything when my son needed me is a hard habit to break. Instead, I let it ring until it stopped, then continued arranging my small collection of novels on the shelf. The second call came 3 minutes later. Then the third. By noon my phone had rung 18 times. Each call more desperate than the last as Gabriel realized I wasn't going to answer. The voicemail started around the 10th call. "Mom, it's me. I went by the house and found that envelope you left. We need to talk. Call me back. His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the underlying tension. He'd found Robert's note about the original deed, and questions were starting to form in his mind. Good. The 15th voicemail was different. Mom, I'm at the bank. There's been some kind of mistake with your account. They're saying you changed the beneficiary information, but that can't be right. You need to call them immediately and fix this. I smiled as I unpacked my coffee mugs. No mistake, Gabriel. No mistake at all. By evening, the calls had reached 28. Gabriel's voice was no longer controlled. What the hell did you do? Mrs. Henderson said you changed everything. That money was supposed to be mine. You promised me that money. Call me back right now. Promised. As if I'd ever promised him money he didn't even know existed. As if 37 years of sacrifice hadn't been promise enough. Tuesday brought a new development. Melissa started calling too. Her voice dripping with the fake sweetness she perfected over 3 years of manipulation. Hi, and it's Melissa. Gabriel is very upset about some banking confusion. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Can you please call us back so we can sort this out? We're family after all. Family. The word tasted bitter even hearing it secondhand through a voicemail. Family doesn't evict each other with 3 days' notice. Family doesn't plot behind each other's backs for months. Family doesn't treat love like a business transaction. By Wednesday, they'd escalated to showing up at my old apartment complex. My former neighbor, Mrs. Chun, called to warn me. And your son and his wife are here banging on doors, asking if anyone knows where you moved. They seem very agitated. I told them I didn't know anything, but I thought you should be aware. Agitated? That was putting it mildly. I could picture Gabriel's face, that same expression he'd worn as a child when he couldn't find a toy he'd carelessly lost. Except this time the toy was $500,000, and he'd lost it through his own cruelty. Thursday morning brought call number 39. This time Gabriel's composure had completely cracked. You vindictive old bitch. You think you can steal my inheritance just because your feelings got hurt? That money belongs to me. I'm your only child. You can't just give it away to strangers. I'll fight this. I'll get a lawyer. You can't do this to me. The mask was finally off. No more pretending this was about banking errors or misunderstandings. He'd shown his true face, and it was uglier than even I had imagined. This was the son I'd raised, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, calling me names that would make a stranger blush. But the most telling part wasn't the insults. It was the phrase, my inheritance. As if I was already dead to him. As if the only value I'd ever had was the money I'd leave behind. Friday brought calls 40 through 42. By now, Gabriel had figured out about the life insurance policy too. His voicemails had devolved into incoherent rage mixed with desperate pleading. You're destroying my future. Melissa and I had plans. We were going to buy a bigger house, start a business. You're ruining everything I've worked for. How can you be so selfish? Selfish. The word that had haunted me for 3 years of marriage to Melissa, thrown at me every time I dared to express an opinion or take up space in my own home. Now it was being hurled at me for the crime of refusing to finance the lifestyle of the people who'd thrown me away. But the final call, number 42, was different. Quieter. Almost broken. Mom, please. I know I hurt you. I know I handled the house thing wrong. But you're my mother. You're supposed to love me no matter what. You can't just cut me off. I need that money. Please call me back. Please. I sat in my small apartment, holding the phone long after the voicemail ended. For just a moment, the little boy in his voice almost broke through my resolve. The child who'd run to me with scraped knees, who'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd hugged me tight and promised he'd always take care of me when he grew up. But then I remembered the documents in his drawer. The casual cruelty of Melissa's texts. The way he discarded me like garbage when I was no longer convenient. And I realized that little boy was gone, if he'd ever existed at all. I didn't call him back. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my sister Margaret in Colorado, the one person in my family who'd never asked me for anything, who'd always treated me with the respect Gabriel couldn't manage. And, my goodness, I haven't heard from you in months. How are you? For the first time since this nightmare began, I told the complete truth. I told her about the eviction, about the documents I'd found, about the bank account Gabriel never knew existed. I told her about the calls, the threats, the desperate pleading of a grown man who'd finally learned that actions have consequences. "Oh, honey," Margaret said when I finished. "I'm so sorry you went through this alone. But I have to say, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. That boy needed to learn this lesson years ago." That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new attempts from Gabriel and Melissa to manipulate or intimidate me into reversing my decision. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, I fell asleep knowing that someone in my family respected the choice I'd made. And in the morning, there would be no more calls. Gabriel's phone privileges had apparently been exhausted. Now the real battle would begin. Saturday arrived with an unexpected knock on my apartment door. I'd been enjoying a quiet morning with coffee and a book when the sharp rapping interrupted the peace I'd been carefully building. Through the peephole, I could see Gabriel standing in the hallway, shifting his weight from foot to foot like a child who needed to use the bathroom. He looked terrible. His usually neat hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and growing desperation. For a moment, seeing him like that, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Mom, I know you're in there. Your neighbor told me which apartment. We need to talk." I leaned against the door but didn't open it. "We have nothing to discuss, Gabriel. Please. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Against my better judgment, I unlocked the chain and opened the door just enough to see his face clearly. The desperation there was real, but so was something else. Anger, barely contained beneath the surface. "You look tired," I said. "I haven't slept in days. Melissa thinks I'm losing my mind. She doesn't understand why you're doing this to us." "To us?" I kept my voice level. "Gabriel, you gave me 3 days to leave my home. You planned it for months without telling me. How exactly am I the one doing something to you?" His face flushed red. "That's different. We needed the money from the house sale. We have plans, investments. But this thing with the bank account, that's just spite. Those plans didn't include me. You would have been fine. You're independent, you have your pension. We're young, we're building our future." The casual dismissal in his voice was breathtaking. As if 37 years of saving meant nothing because I had a modest pension that barely covered basic expenses. As if being 62 meant I didn't deserve security or comfort or the fruits of my own labor. "Gabriel, what exactly did you think would happen? Did you think I'd just disappear quietly and leave everything behind for you to inherit? I thought you'd understand. I thought family meant something to you." The hypocrisy was stunning. "Family? You mean the family meeting where you discussed my future without me? The family planning where you decided my home was worth more than my happiness?" His composure cracked completely. "Damn it, Mom. That money was supposed to be mine. You saved it for me. You can't just give it away because your feelings got hurt. I saved it for the son who loved me. That person doesn't exist anymore." Gabriel stepped closer, and for the first time in my life, I felt intimidated by my own child. "You're going to reverse this. All of it. The beneficiary changes everything. Because if you don't, you'll lose more than just me." "What's that supposed to mean?" His smile was cold, calculated. "Melissa's been documenting things. Your behavior, your mental state. All those times you seemed confused, all those occasions when you repeated yourself or forgot things. She thinks you might not be competent to make major financial decisions anymore." The threat hit me like a physical blow. They were going to try to have me declared mentally incompetent. It was brilliant in its cruelty because it contained just enough truth to be believable. I was 62, I did sometimes forget where I'd put my keys. I had repeated stories without realizing it. Normal signs of aging that could be twisted into evidence of dementia in the right hands. "You would do that to your own mother?" "I would do whatever it takes to protect my family's future." His family. Not our family. His. And I wasn't part of it. "Get out," I said quietly. "Mom, you have 48 hours to fix this. After that, we file the paperwork." I closed the door in his face and turned the deadbolt with shaking hands. Through the thin walls, I could hear him pacing in the hallway for several minutes before finally leaving. The next 2 days passed in a haze of anxiety and planning. I knew Gabriel wasn't bluffing. Melissa was smart enough to know exactly which doctors to approach, which lawyers to hire, which documentation to fabricate. They could make my life a living hell, tie up my assets in legal battles, force me to prove my sanity in court while they drained my resources with attorney fees. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They assumed I was still the same woman who'd spent decades avoiding conflict, who'd always chosen peace over principle. They didn't realize that losing everything had freed me from the fear of losing anything. Monday morning I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Dr. Patricia Wells, my physician for the past 15 years. I scheduled a comprehensive mental health evaluation for that afternoon, requesting that she document my cognitive function, memory, and decision-making capacity. If Gabriel wanted to question my competency, I'd make sure there was recent, professional evidence of my mental clarity. The second call was to Robert's old friend, James Morrison, who'd become a successful attorney specializing in elder law. I'd never contacted him before, too proud to reach out to Robert's friends for help, but pride was a luxury I could no longer afford. And of course I remember you. Robert talked about you constantly. What can I do for you? I explained the situation as clearly and factually as possible. Gabriel's threats, Melissa's documentation strategy, the timeline they'd given me. James listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. They're playing a dangerous game, he said when I finished. False claims of incompetency can backfire spectacularly if the supposed victim is prepared, which you now are. I can have preliminary paperwork filed by this afternoon, establishing your legal right to manage your assets as you see fit. The third call was the hardest. Margaret answered on the second ring. And how are you holding up? They're threatening to have me declared incompetent. Gabriel and Melissa. They want to challenge the beneficiary changes in court. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if we'd been disconnected. Then Margaret spoke, and her voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. That little bastard. Robert would be ashamed of him. Margaret, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Have you noticed any signs that I'm losing my mental capacity? Anything that would make you question my ability to make decisions? And you just outmaneuvered a son and daughter-in-law who thought they were smarter than you. You protected assets they didn't even know existed and made decisions that were both legally sound and morally justified. If that's what incompetence looks like, I wish more people suffered from it. Tuesday afternoon, Gabriel called one final time. I answered, ready for whatever he had to say. Time's up, Mom. We filed the papers this morning. Our lawyer thinks we have a strong case. Gabriel, I have something to tell you. It's too late for negotiations. Yesterday, I underwent a comprehensive mental health evaluation. Dr. Wells found me to be in excellent cognitive condition. I also retained an attorney who specializes in cases exactly like this one. He says false competency claims often result in sanctions against the people who file them. Silence. But here's the thing I really wanted you to know, I continued. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with the director of St. Catherine's to discuss how they plan to use their new endowment. Your inheritance is going to fund a new wing for elderly residents whose families have abandoned them. They're going to call it the Gabriel Mitchell Memorial Wing. The sound Gabriel made wasn't quite a scream, but it wasn't human either. You're insane. You're destroying everything. No, Gabriel. I'm building something. Something that will help people you'll never meet, people who deserve better than what their own children gave them. Just like I deserved better than what my son gave me. I hung up the phone and immediately blocked his number. Whatever came next, whatever legal battles or family drama or attempts at manipulation, I was done being afraid. They'd already taken everything from me that they could take. But in trying to destroy me, they'd forgotten that sometimes, when you have nothing left to lose, you become more dangerous than anyone expected. Chapter 6. The Deserved Freedom. 3 months later, I stood in the sunlit common room of St. Catherine's retirement home, watching as workers put the finishing touches on a brass plaque that would hang beside the entrance to the new wing. The Gabriel Mitchell Memorial Wing, just as I'd promised. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew the story. The legal battle had lasted exactly 6 weeks. Gabriel and Melissa's attorney had withdrawn their incompetency claim after Dr. Wells' evaluation was entered into evidence, along with testimony from my banker, my doctor, and 3 character witnesses who'd known me for decades. James Morrison had been right about false claims backfiring. The judge had been so unimpressed with their case that he'd ordered them to pay my legal fees. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was here, in this building that now hummed with activity funded by money that would have otherwise gone to a son who'd seen his mother as an obstacle to overcome. "Mrs. Mitchell, there's someone here to see you." I turned to find Sarah, one of the activity coordinators, standing beside an elderly man I didn't recognize. He was well-dressed but frail, using a walker to support himself. "This is Mr. Henry Walsh," Sarah said. "He's going to be one of the first residents in the new wing." Mr. Walsh extended a shaky hand. "I wanted to thank you personally. My daughter told me about what you did, how you made this place possible. She said your son didn't appreciate what he had." I shook his hand gently. "How long since you've seen your daughter, Mr. Walsh?" His smile was sad but resigned. 3 years. She lives in California now, has her own family. Says she's too busy to visit, but she sends a card at Christmas. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. At least now I have somewhere nice to live out my days. Thanks to you." As he walked away, Sarah touched my arm. "He's one of 12 new residents we're taking this month. All of them people whose families can't or won't care for them anymore. The waiting list is already full for next year. 12 people who would have comfortable, dignified housing because Gabriel had decided his mother was disposable. The mathematics of karma were beautiful sometimes. I spent the rest of the afternoon reading to residents in the library, something I'd been doing every Tuesday and Thursday since the wing opened. Today's audience included Mrs. Chun, my former neighbor who'd moved here after her own family decided her small apartment was too much trouble to maintain. She'd recognized me on her first day and burst into tears. "And I'm so sorry about your son. I never told you, but I saw how that wife of his looked at you during those Sunday dinners. Like you were something stuck to her shoe." We'd become close friends since then, bonding over the shared experience of children who'd grown into strangers. As I was leaving that evening, my phone rang. For a split second my heart jumped, thinking it might be Gabriel. But the caller ID showed Margaret's number. "How was your day at the home?" she asked. "Good. Productive. Peaceful. Any word from you-know-who?" "Nothing for 6 weeks. I think he's finally accepted that it's over." Actually, I knew more than I was telling Margaret. Through Mrs. Chen's gossip network, I'd learned that Gabriel and Melissa were struggling financially. The house sale had covered their immediate debts, but without the inheritance they'd been counting on, their expansion plans had collapsed. Melissa's credit card bills were mounting, Gabriel's business investments weren't paying off, and they'd had to move into a smaller apartment. Most satisfying of all, their marriage was showing signs of strain. Apparently, Melissa hadn't taken well to discovering that her husband's family money was now funding a retirement home instead of her lifestyle. She'd been seen around town with other men, and Gabriel had been drinking heavily. I should have felt sorry for him. Maybe a year ago I would have. But watching the residents of the Gabriel Mitchell Memorial Wing, seeing how grateful they were for simple dignity and care, I found it hard to feel sympathy for my son's self-inflicted problems. "Margaret, can I tell you something?" "Of course. I'm happy. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I'm genuinely happy." It was true. My small apartment had become a sanctuary. My days were filled with volunteer work that felt meaningful. I'd started taking art classes, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. I'd even begun dating, something that would have been impossible while Gabriel and Melissa were scrutinizing my every move. His name was Frank, a widower I'd met at the library who made me laugh and treated me like I was interesting rather than just useful. We were taking things slowly, both of us careful with hearts that had been broken by people we trusted, but it was nice to remember what it felt like to be valued for who I was rather than what I could provide. "You deserve to be happy," Margaret said. "You've earned it. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh. And you gave that boy 34 years of unconditional love and support. He repaid you with eviction papers. You weren't harsh. You were finally fair." After we hung up, I sat on my small balcony with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Tomorrow would bring another day at the retirement home, another art class, another quiet evening with a book or maybe dinner with Frank. A year ago, I would have been preparing Sunday dinner for Gabriel and Melissa, listening to them complain about their finances while they planned to sell my home out from under me. I would have been cleaning up after them, serving them, making myself smaller so they could feel bigger. Now my Sundays belonged to me. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made me look up. A young woman was climbing to the apartment above mine, struggling with grocery bags and what looked like a crying baby. Without thinking, I stood up and walked to the railing. "Do you need help?" She looked up surprised. "Oh, that's so kind, but I couldn't." "Nonsense. I'm Anne from apartment 12. Let me give you a hand." As I helped her carry her groceries upstairs, she introduced herself as Jessica, a single mother who just moved in. Her story was familiar and heartbreaking. Boyfriend left when she got pregnant. Family disowned her for keeping the baby, struggling to make ends meet while caring for a 6-month-old. "I don't know many people in the building yet," she said as we reached her door. "It gets lonely sometimes." "Well, you know me now. And if you ever need someone to watch Emma while you run errands, I'm usually home." Her eyes filled with tears. "Really? You would do that?" "Of course. Neighbors should help each other." As I walked back to my apartment, I realized something profound had just happened. For the first time in years, I'd offered help without being asked, without feeling obligated, without calculating what I might get in return. I'd offered it because I wanted to, because helping Jessica felt good, because kindness given freely was more satisfying than sacrifice demanded constantly. That night, I wrote in the journal I'd started keeping since moving out. Not about Gabriel or Melissa or the money they'd lost, but about the life I was building. About Frank's gentle humor and Jessica's grateful smile, and Mr. Walsh's dignity in the face of abandonment. I wrote about the woman I was becoming at 62, someone who'd learned that family wasn't about blood or obligation, but about mutual respect and genuine care. Someone who discovered that losing everything you thought mattered could lead to finding everything that actually did. Outside my window, the city hummed with life. Somewhere out there, Gabriel was learning to live with the consequences of his choices. And here, in my small apartment filled with books and plants and the quiet satisfaction of a life lived on my own terms, I was finally truly free.